Hello everyone, this is Mandan Raghavan. This video we are going to see data types in Java. If we consider any programming languages, we are going to handle the data. In order to handle the data very proper and very efficient way, we need to understand what are the different data types that will be covered by the language. For example, in Java, what are the different data types and what are the different things we can do with the data types. If we consider Java data types, there will be mainly two categories. One is primitive, another one is non-primitive. We will go with primitive. Primitive in the sense, it is a very basic block that you can build with the data. For example, any programming language will have the primitive data types, which will be the very basic unit of that language, which means that this is the very underlying structure of data. For example, primitive may be numeric and Boolean. Boolean, as you know, that it will be only the true or false. Numeric, again, it will be divided into two categories. One is like an integral, another one will be a character. Character, you might be wondering why it comes under the numeric. Why? Because even the character will be represented as a Unicode value. So that's the reason we are just having the character under the numeric tab. And integral in the sense just any numbers. If you have the decimal points, that will be considered as a floating point. If you have the full value, that will be considered as an integer. But however, again, integer will be divided into four different parts: byte, short, integer, long. This all will be comes under the integer with a full number without any decimals. Whereas floating number, again, it will be having two types, float and double, whereas double will be having more precision over the float. In simple, you will be having the very basic types, numbers, characters, Boolean. What about the non-primitives or reference type? That's where the Java classes comes into picture. You may think like, whatever the problem you have, you might just have the data like numeric character, we can manage with that. But if you go with complex data types, or let's say if you want to create your own template, or let's say the blueprint of any data types. For example, if I want to create the student, you cannot create the student name and the integer, let's say, for example, ID and the college, everything with the primitive data types. And it will be very difficult to access the different parameters of the student attributes, right? So in that scenario, what you will be doing, like you will be creating one class called student. It will be having the different parameters, which will be the building blocks of this one. This one in the sense numeric or Boolean or character, simply a primitive data types. But along with that, in the class, you will be having the different methods to access that attributes or the fields. Basically, class will be just having the, let's say, the cohesive properties and cohesive methods attached to that for the given object. So in simple, non-primitive will be the class instances. So that means that once you have the class, you will be creating the instance. For example, if you have the student template, or let's consider the real-time example, you have the form for the college student. The form will be considered just like your class. If you just take the photocopy of that, and if you take, for example, fill the details, that will be attached to a specific student. For example, David. So David is filling the form. So David is the instance of the template, or let's say the student form. Once you have filled, that will be the instance of the college joining form. So that means that this will be considered, or the form filled will be considered the type of the college joining form. So here you can consider the college joining form will be the class or the type, and the instance will be the just a filled form of the joining form. That will be considered as the actual data. So here you can consider the different things. String, array, user defined class. So which means that the class can be created by yourself, or it can be from the Java already. For example, string, array are the classes that are created by the Java itself that are available to you. That means that once you create the instance, just filling the data or just filling the constructor function. We have not seen what is class, what is construction, but however, you just consider you are creating the object for the given class. So that will be the type of the given class. For example, if you have created some string, that will be considered as a string class instance. Same for the array, same for the any defined class. So here you can clearly understand primitive and the reference type. Next one will be just the numerical understanding, such as like what is the memory size of the given data types. It is very essential to know about the size of the given data type. Based on the type, you will be having maximum and minimum limits. For example, let's say if you are going to take a data type as a byte, then you can store only 128 minus, or let's say minus 128 to plus 127. Same for the long. Long will be having more range. Integer will be having the different range when you compare with all the integer types. Integer types is nothing but byte, short, integer, long. So based on our requirement, we will be taking the different data types, and taking a correct data type will give you the more performance. Right. And next one, float. Under the float, we will be having two types, float and double. Here you can see clearly the double will be having 8 bytes. That means that it will be having more precision over the float, which has only 4 bytes. And again, Boolean will be only 1 bit actually, because it is a 0 or 1, true or false. Character will be having 2 bytes, which is very equivalent to your short. Why? Because your character will be having as well as the character as well as the Unicode value, which means that let's say which language it is. Language in the sense, nowadays we will be having different languages such as like English, Spanish, right? Hindi. There are a lot of other languages. Even you can have the other languages characters. So to identify which language it is, or to identify the Unicode value, you will be having the character with 2 bytes rather than having only 1 byte. So this way we will be having the different categories of memory and the ranges of the different data types. Next one, default value. So this is very important. Why? Because the default value will be given in case if you are creating one, or you are declaring one data variable and you have not given any initial value. If you are not giving any initial value, Java will be giving the default value for that. For example, if you are creating the, let's say the variable for the byte, and if you don't give anything, the default value will be 0. For the same for the long, same for the float, same for the double. Almost for the integer values, let it be float or let's say integer, you will be having 0. In case of float, you will be having 0.0. But Boolean, it will be 0 equivalent, which is nothing but false. Character, obviously, you will be having the Unicode value of 0000. But what about objects? Let's say you have created one class and you have created one instance, but you have not initialized. We have not seen what is instantiation. But let's say the default value for the object, or let's say class instance, will be a 0. So not 0 actually, it is the null. So we will be detailedly seeing what is instance and what is the default value. If the default value is null, what will be happening? Generally, you will be having the null pointer exception. But this is just to note it down. We will be seeing in the class and object classes. Next one, we are going to just see some little demo on the declaration, initialization, and let's say the assignment. For understanding these simple things, we don't need to create a different Java program and just execute it one by one. This time we can take the advantage of JShell to understand the very basics about the data types. For example, let's say I am creating one integer. I just let me clear my screen. Integer, let's say A, and enter. So here you can clearly see integer A. This will be the data type. Integer will be your data type and A will be your variable name. But however, we have not given any initial value. We are just declaring. We are just declaring a variable and we are mentioning the type of that variable. Since we have not given any initial value, it will be taking the default value. Just to confirm this one, just go for the float. And let's say F, enter. You can clearly see here, the default value for the float we have seen is 0.0. That's what we are getting here. In later point of time, again, you can assign the value. For example, integer A, I'm going to assign. Now already have the declaration. Just I will be mentioning only the A, not again integer A. Why? Because already we have declared. Now we are going to just assign the value and replacing the default value with our current value. For example, let's say 20. Now you can see it is the assignment. But some places you can directly declare as well as the initialize the value. For example, integer C equal to 44. Here you are doing both the things, which means that you are declaring the variable and initializing the variable at the same time. So this way we have seen what is declaration. You will have the declaration without any initial value, which means that it will be taking the default values based on the data type. Let's say in some places you will be having initialization along with your declaration. Or let's say you will be having the declaration at the first. In later point of time, you will be initializing. It can be called as a late initialization as well. But actually not, it's a late initialization. You are just replacing the default value with your actual value. So this can be applicable for anything in the sense, any kind of data types. But in case of class instances, the default value will be null. Then in that case, you need to create an object and assign to that variable. But however, we will be seeing detailing about the classes and instances in later stage. Now, as of now, we have understood what are the different data types available inside Java languages, such as primitive and non-reference type, or let's say non-primitive types, which is called as a reference type. And one more thing to be noted is all the primitive data types will be having the actual value in the memory location. For example, integer a is equal to find the sense, it will be having some memory location assigned to that. In that location, you will be having the actual value. For example, a is equal to 20 in the sense, the actual 20 value will be placed in that memory. Whereas for the reference type, since you know that reference type will be the complex data type, which you will be building over the class template, right? So it may be having the different data members and it may be having the different, let's say the methods. So this just like a assembling different data types or different methods together under the class, right? Since it's a complex data type, you will be having the reference in the sense you will be having the address of the instance. The actual instance will be at some other location, which will be having again links to the other data members and methods. But in simple, you will be having the reference for the instance. So that's the reason it will be called as a reference data type. But how actually it references, what do you mean by actually reference data type? How it will be useful? Those are the things you will be seeing in the later stage. But to be remember, we will be having the primitive data types. The primitive data types will be actually having the value itself inside the memory location. Whereas reference data type will be having only the reference of the object. So this is all about very basics about the data type. So again, we will recollect. So data type and primitive, non-primitive. Primitive, you can see the different types: numeric, Boolean, character, integral. And again, we have seen the different memory restrictions or the memory limitations for the different data types and ranges for those. And we have seen what are the default values for the primitive data types. So this is all about the Java data types. So thanks all, thanks for watching and have a great day.